the Growing for Market podcast.
I went to the wholesale market in New York City, which is largely concentrated on one street in Manhattan, 28th Street. And that's where there's, half a dozen long-standing wholesale companies where florists around New York City have been shopping for decades. And so I just went door to door cold calling. I, basically had an armful of flowers and just went shop to shop and said, hey, I'm a local grower. This is a sample of what we grow. We think we have really high quality stuff and in quantities that I think you would be interested in. What do you think? And so, I just made cold calls in person. But, a couple of those doors that I walked into, I was met with very interested people and they wanted to try it out.
Hello, and welcome to the Growing for Market podcast, where we talk about growing, marketing, and the business of growing vegetables and flowers for local markets, like farmers markets, CSA, farm stands, and local wholesaling. I'm Rebecca Kutzer-Rice, your host and a writer for Growing for Market magazine. For 33 years, the magazine for vegetable and flower market farmers. If you're enjoying the podcast, just wait till you see the magazine. Go to growingformarket.com for more. Also, if you could give us a follow and a rating, it really helps other like-minded people find the podcast. And now let's take a minute to hear from some of our sponsors. It's with their generous support that we can bring you the podcast for free.
Whether it's tomatoes to market, flowers in the spring, or vegetables for your family, growing in a greenhouse protected from the weather provides the right environment for a harvest you can count on. Rimmel greenhouses are strong, durable, and easy to assemble, offering the quality that you need to grow productively year-round. Rimmel greenhouses are proudly built right here in America and shipped to anywhere in the U.S. With technical sales staff members located across the country, many with growing experience, the Rimmel Greenhouse's team of experts will serve as your trusted partner every step of the way to ensure that you get exceptional value from your greenhouse investment. Visit Rimmel.com to get a quote today.
I don't know about you, but I got into farming to grow food, not to spend my time creating pack lists, writing newsletters, responding to emails, or maintaining web stores. If I could spend less time on my phone and computer and more time farming, that would be a win. Enter Farmhand. Farmhand is the only all-in-one virtual assistant built by and for CSA farmers. It takes care of the admin, managing orders, customer communications, and automating tedious tasks so you can get back to doing what you love. On average, Farmhand saves CSA farmers 6 hours a week. That's 6 hours you could spend with your family, out in the field, or simply taking a breather. So, what would you do with an extra 6 hours? Now's the time to get your systems ready for next season. Learn how Farmhand can help at farmhand.partners/GFM. That's farmhand.partners/GFM.
I am so excited to welcome Bootstrap Farmer as a sponsor of the podcast. I've known them for a dozen years, and if anyone tells you nothing is made in the USA anymore, well, they're headquartered and warehoused in Paris, Texas. They make their own all-metal, all-inclusive greenhouse frames of steel made in the USA and fabricated in Texas, and their heavy-duty, reusable propagation and microgreens trays are Midwest-made. With a complete range of supplies, they have just about everything for propagation and growing, including heat mats, ground cover, frost blankets, silage tarps, irrigation, and trellising. Want to color code your seed starting flats? They've got heavy-duty trays that will last for years in a full range of colors, great for keeping farm seedlings separate from retail or just for fun. And they have an experienced team of growers to support everything they sell. If you've heard of the NRCS High Tunnel Initiative providing grants for hoop houses, but have been put off by the paperwork, Bootstrap Farmer has a guide that will walk you through the application process so you can get your hoop house funded this winter. For all that and more, check out Bootstrap Farmer at bootstrapfarmer.com.
Hi, everyone. Today, I'm so excited to talk with Matt Dell. Matt co-owns Treadlight Farm in Kerhonkson, New York, with his wife, Irene. Treadlight Farm is a USDA certified organic cut flower farm and plant nursery. I first connected with Matt through the Association of Specialty Cut Flower Growers, through which he's given some excellent talks about native plants as cut flowers. Matt has so much to share with our audience, and I'm excited to chat with him today about organic certification for flowers, native plants, selling to wholesalers, and a whole lot more. Welcome, Matt. It's good to see you.
Thanks, Rebecca. Yeah, it's great to see you again, too.
So, just to get things started, it would be great to hear about how you and Irene first got started farming. Did you guys grow up farming or in an agricultural region? Have you always been farming flowers?
No, we both grew up in fairly urban or suburban places. I in California and Irene in New Jersey. So we are not born farmers. We are what I call learned farmers. I first got interested in farming when I had my first job after college. I was doing research in rural areas, actually in a couple different countries in West Africa. And a lot of my research was with farmers. So I was spending a lot of time interviewing people who lived and worked on farms. And I started just kind of volunteering with them as, a way to sort of make up for taking their time with my interviews. And that's when I got bit by the bug. I loved it instantly. Loved working outside, working with my hands. And then when that job was over, I started traveling and working on farms to try to just get a sense of like, okay, what do I maybe want to do in farming? And along that journey is when Irene and I met, and we started working and traveling together, working on farms primarily actually in South America. And then we got our first kind of professional production scale experience working on a vegetable farm in Long Island, Quail Hill Farm, New York's first CSA farm, actually. After a few years working there, we thought we would set out to start our own small farm. And originally the idea was to do vegetables and cut flowers. And Irene really wanted to start with the cut flowers, kind of start simple. Let's just focus on one thing. And I fell head over heels for the flowers. We kind of have never looked back, and I never got back to the dream of growing food with our business. Yeah, I like to call flower farming for plant nerds, because what really keeps me excited about it is all the different species we get to work with. A flower grower will have the opportunity to work with hundreds of species of plant in their career. The possibilities are kind of endless, as opposed to a vegetable grower who's going to be growing the same, sure, varieties come and go and change quite a bit, and there's a lot of differences between them, but overall your palette is going to be a lot narrower. So yeah, we've started with ornamental plants with our business and haven't looked back.
That's really awesome. I love that story. I didn't know all the history and sort of international farming you had done as well. So, what does your farm look like today? How many acres in production? How much covered space do you have? Staff? When's your season start? All that good stuff.
So when Irene and I started the business, it was just the two of us and some hand tools. We didn't even have a walk-behind tiller. We just had a small little propagation greenhouse and a little bit of field space that we managed by hand. After a couple of years, we started having some part-time seasonal help, and that just sort of grew until we actually moved our business. After the first 5 years, we had an opportunity to lease land long-term on some really good farmland. And so we moved our company, and by then we had, I think, another high tunnel or two, and so we moved our greenhouses over. And by then we also had a tractor, so we started scaling up and got a tractor and some equipment to go with it. Started hiring more people, and fast forward to today, now we manage about 20 acres. We have about 20,000 square feet of greenhouse space, mostly 30 by 96 size tunnels. And I guess we have six of those, and then another smaller building. And we're putting up another one or two this winter, and we seem to kind of add one every winter at this point. And we grow annuals on 3 to 4 acres every year, annuals and biennials, and we have about an acre of perennials. And the rest of the space is managed in cover crops. So we essentially have two different fields that we use for annuals and biennials, and we just swap back and forth every year, so we don't have to think too hard about rotation. And so every time we go to plant something, it's going into ground that the previous full season had cover crop in it. Yeah, that's about it. We also have a steel building for processing, It's kind of our center of operations. I have this little office shed, and that's kind of it.
That's great. I love that you have a lot more land that you're managing and then swap between cover crops and annuals. I think that's the dream, right? That's what we all want. So,
Yeah. If anyone has that opportunity to lease more land than you need, I highly recommend it, because I find that if you have it, you'll probably use it. um, and if not, then you can do fun things like that, like manage spaces and cover crop for a whole season, get like lots of different benefits from those cover crops before having to plant cash crops in it.
yeah, that's awesome. How many staff members do you have on that? That's a lot of production.
Yeah. Like any farm, our staff fluctuates quite a bit from the slower part of the year to the busier time of the season. Year round, we have a kind of central core staff of about 6 or 7. And then in the summertime, our numbers double, or a little more than double. We usually have anywhere from 11 to 15 total staff in the height of summer, because we need a lot of help harvesting. Yeah, so about 6 or 7 year-round staff, and then 7 or 8 seasonal employees.
Yeah, it's a big operation, Matt. It's really cool. Who are your primary customers?
So yeah, we're a wholesale business, so we only sell to other businesses. We don't do retail sales anymore, and that actually officially became our marketing strategy like 2 or 3 years ago. We finally cut out the last farmers markets. It was progressive, but we started as most farms do, just doing farmers markets, because the barrier to entry is so low. Anyone can kind of show up and have a tent and sell things at farmers markets. But over time, we started to develop relationships with floral designers. And I think we'll talk about this a little later, but also wholesalers, because we're close to the New York metropolitan area. So there's kind of those 2 tiers of wholesale. And the more that business grew, the less the farmers markets made sense. And so, yeah, a few years ago, or I guess 2 years ago now, we cut out the last of our farmers markets, and we got our weekends back. So now we can all enjoy our weekends and have a full 2 days off a week during the growing season.
Careful, you're gonna make me jealous over here because I think it's funny, maybe worth noting to listeners too, because our farm also sells into New York City, but we're 100% retail. So it just goes to show that, different markets have so much room for different farms depending on who your customers are.
Absolutely.
What made you sort of decide to drop all the retail? I mean, you mentioned weekends. Were there other draws for you?
Yeah. So, the more we started working with wholesale clients, and the more our reputation grew to, as a company that has high quality, fresh product, the less we were able to meet demand from wholesale customers. And so when we started getting to a point where we could barely keep up with orders, that's sort of when we decided to drop the farmers markets, because now we're in a situation where we're harvesting to order. We're not harvesting anything with a big question hanging over our heads of like, is this going to be purchased by somebody? Is the farmers market going to get rained out? So there was no longer a question of like ever coming home with unsold product from the farmers market. And so it just made life and sales much more predictable. And so, yeah, kind of as the wholesale business grew, is the more that it grew, the less it made sense for us to keep doing farmers markets.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I know when we've spoken before, you mentioned that you still have like a wait list of floral designers who want to get in. So it seems like you're doing a great job of building that market up.
Thanks. Yeah, it's definitely true. Yeah, unfortunately, every year we get a lot of inquiries that we have to turn down.
Yeah, that's great. So I think a lot of our listeners, if they're growing flowers at all, are selling directly to consumers and maybe a little bit to florists. So I'm really interested to hear about your experiences selling to a larger wholesaler. I think it's something a lot of growers are intimidated by. They don't know how to even get started in that. So I'm curious about how did you get into it, and then what's your experience been like?
No, it's a great question, and I think there's a lot of room for other regional growers in our area, definitely, to get into the wholesale market. So basically, it's hard sort of matching your production scale to your marketing strategy. At the beginning, if you're just going to do farmers markets and maybe work with one or two local florists or designers, it's maybe not as hard. But if you try to scale that up, you start finding yourself in a situation where you have some things that grow really well and really easily for you, and you have a lot of it. And if you don't want to see a lot of that go to waste, then you have to find an outlet that can reliably take more product. And so that's kind of, as we were scaling up, that was sort of the situation we were finding ourselves in. It's like, okay, well, what are we going to do with this? We don't want to take on more farmers markets. We're really liking working with designers, and we want to continue to sell to them. So what are some other kind of wholesale options here? So I went to the wholesale market in New York City, which is largely concentrated on one street in Manhattan, 28th Street. And that's where there's, half a dozen long-standing wholesale companies where florists around New York City have been shopping for decades. And so I just went door to door cold calling. I, basically had an armful of flowers and just went shop to shop and said, hey, I'm a local grower. This is a sample of what we grow. We think we have really high quality stuff and in quantities that I think you would be interested in. What do you think? And so, yeah, I just made cold calls in person, and I went to a few shops, and honestly, there is a lot of built-in skepticism in those shops about local growers, because, I think there used to be a much more advanced flower industry in North America. And then I guess as the popular history goes, is that like with NAFTA, a lot of production moved to other parts of the world. And that's when the US flower industry sort of started taking a dive. And there just aren't nearly as many kind of long time producers as there used to be, and large scale producers. And so I think because of that, a lot of wholesalers have experiences working with really small operations. And that can be a mixed bag of quality standards and, available quantities. And so some wholesalers, I think, have a little bit of built-in skepticism. Maybe some of them had some bad experiences. And so, yeah, I was definitely met with some skepticism, but, also a lot of interest. It really depends on the company that on the doors you're walking into and who you're talking to. But, a couple of those doors that I walked into, I was met with like very interested people, and they wanted to try it out. They said, all right, well, let's give it a go. Let's see what you got. And we'll take a small amount at first. And if things go well, then we'll take a little more, and then so on and so on. And we found one wholesaler that has just been a true pleasure to work with. I think they're one of the best wholesalers in New York City. Of course, I have a biased opinion because they're the ones that I work with, but a company called Abra Flora on 28th Street in Manhattan. They have a great reputation among florists and floral designers all over New York City as just being a real pleasure to work with. And they're friendly. They really have that human touch, both for their clients and for their vendors. So we've really focused on that, building that relationship and maintaining that relationship. So we work exclusively with one wholesaler in Manhattan. And yeah, they will, by now we have a really good relationship. They really trust us to bring them a lot of variety and high quality products. So yeah, we kind of bring them as much as we can every week, in addition to what we're selling to our designer and florist clients. That's how we got into it.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that story of going door to door. It's so old fashioned. That's great. And now let's take a minute to hear from some of our sponsors. It's with their generous support that we can bring you the podcast for free.
If you're an experienced vegetable farmer, don't miss out on the 2025 Organic Vegetable Production Conference. In its 9th year, this conference fills that expert-level niche you're looking for. Farmer presenters share the nitty-gritty details of their production practices and also speak on a wide range of topics, from storage crop facilities and pack shed adaptations to pest management, farm worker perspectives, and more. With online sessions on January 23rd and 24th for only $75 and in-person sessions on January 31st and February 1st in Madison, Wisconsin, you can plug in no matter where you are. Register today at bit.ly/OVPC-2025. That's bit.ly/OVPC-2025.
Today's episode of the Growing for Market podcast is brought to you by BCS America. On our farm, we've had our BCS two-wheel tractor for over a decade, and with no belts to slip, its all-gear-driven construction is still going strong. Though we originally got it for rototilling, we kept it even when we went mostly no-till because it can do so many other things around the farm. From snow blowing to making raised beds with the rotary plow to chipping wood, it can do just about anything you might need on a farm with the right attachment. Need to shred a cover crop? A BCS flail mower will make quick work of even the most vigorous cover crop and chop it up so it breaks down quickly. Want to stir in compost or amendments without inverting soil layers? A power harrow turns your BCS into a precise tilthing machine with depth control so you don't mix deeper than you want to. With so many attachments to choose from, it truly is the Swiss Army knife of farm implements. It's why, instead of saying two-wheel tractor, so many people just say BCS. Tractors and attachments are on sale through the end of the year. Visit bcsamerica.com to find sale pricing and your nearest dealer.
And now back to the show. What is the volume that they're needing? I'm really curious about bunches per week or whatever the metric is.
Right. Yeah. Well, there's a few different metrics. There's dollar metrics, there's bucket metrics, there's bunch metrics. They tend to buy things by the bucket. The attitude for a long time has been you got something new that we haven't had before, send 2 buckets of it and we'll see how it goes. So that's sort of the minimum quantity for anything to be interesting to them is to have at least 2 buckets full of a specific product. So yeah, we fill up a 16-foot box truck, floor to ceiling, several, usually that's 3 layers of buckets with a tiny walkway in between, once a week for a lot of the season. And then when we get to August, that starts being twice a week. So yeah, a full box truck twice a week to New York City. How many bunches that is, that varies widely because, as you know, certain crops you can only get 8 bunches in a bucket. Other crops you can get 20 bunches in a bucket. So I would be hard pressed to say how many bunches on average that is. Buckets, we typically do probably around 200 buckets, 200 to 250 buckets per trip. So well over 500, I think, in a week because we also do a lot of local sales. So
Sure. It's a lot of volume. It's interesting that, 2 buckets is the minimum. I always have visions of a truckload just of white ball dahlias and nothing else. So it's good to know
sometimes it feels
maybe.
that way.
Yeah.
It's funny you say white ball dahlias because these last 2 weeks we've just been getting slammed with orders for white ball dahlias. I think we've been selling 200 bunches of white ball dahlias a week these last 2 weeks, which is,
Yeah.
it's actually not a huge percentage of the truck, but it feels like a lot of white ball dahlias.
Sure. Yeah. Well, it is September, so that makes sense.
Right.
What are some of your biggest flower crops, over the whole year? And then I was curious too, do you grow different crops for different customers?
Yeah, we don't really grow different crops for different customers. There are some crops where we just never have a lot of, and so we sort of have 2 tiers of wholesale clients. We have designers and florists, and then we have our wholesalers. We just work with one in Manhattan and one outside of Manhattan. And yeah, so things that we have in small supply but that are highly sought after, generally our designers buy all of those, so we don't get a chance to sell those to wholesalers. But by and large, our main crops throughout the year are our spring crops are kind of the typical heavy hitters, ranunculus and poppies in the spring, and in the summer, lisianthus, and and then dahlias. Dahlias are definitely our biggest seller dollar wise and quantity wise. And then in the later part of the fall, heirloom chrysanthemums. So those are definitely our biggest crops. And then in between, there's like a whole medley, of course, of summer annuals, and or late spring annuals, and a lot of biennials, kind of between the summer or between the spring greenhouse crops and the summer lisianthus and dahlias. We have a lot of biennials that we harvest from the outdoors. So.
Like foxglove, campanula, any others?
Yeah, a lot of bachelor's buttons. We typically grow those as biennials and as annuals. But foxgloves are definitely one of our biggest biennials. We've been growing more and more delphinium as well. That one we initially didn't grow very much of because the cut flower trade is used to delphinium that's been treated with preservatives that we're not allowed to use as an organic business. And so those products actually look very different, like a delphinium stem that's been treated typically with a silver-based preservative. Its flowers stay on the stem as it develops, so you don't get any shattering of the lower flowers while the rest of the stem opens up. So yeah, you see these nice big full delphinium stems. If you grow them organically and don't use that, typically the stem looks different, right? The lower third is open, and the rest of it will generally continue to open, but you do get the lower ones falling off as that happens. So we had not been growing delphinium. Now we're growing more and more of it. But we have a pretty extensive list of other fun biennials. We grow, we try to grow really kooky stuff since we're near the New York metropolitan area. A lot of designers there, I think, want kind of funky, hard to find or unique products that you can't really get anywhere else. So there's a couple of salvias that fit that bill. There's another spike type flower that I'm really loving as a biennial, Linaria. That's been a great biennial for us lately. And penstemons, we grow quite a bit of. Fauna scabiosa. What else? Coreopsis, Asclepius. And then there's also, more and more we're growing perennials as biennials, like herbaceous perennials that can be kind of hard to manage as perennials because over time they get weedy. So there's a lot of them that will flower, fairly productively in their first flowering season if you plant them the year before, treat them as a biennial. So we're growing more and more plants that way too. And so those are technically not biennials, botanically. I mean, a lot of these plants are short-lived perennials where they come from. But biennials are becoming a much bigger part of our sales in the first half of the year.
That's really cool. I do feel like you guys are known for some of the weird stuff in the city. I actually sometimes, we see people, the florists coming out of 28th Street walking down with it. And I feel like your brand is really recognizable. Even if you can't see the label, you can guess where that came from. That came from Treadlight because it's something you've never really seen before. So listeners should definitely check out your Instagram for some inspiration.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, that's definitely one of the ways we've tried to set ourselves apart is growing weird stuff that you can't find anywhere else.
Cool. So you're growing on a pretty moderate scale, I would say, right? You're a lot larger than, a small market farm with like a quarter acre in production, but you're also, here in New Jersey, we have some flower farms that are hundreds and hundreds of acres, and you're not quite that big yet either. So I'm curious about sort of how you're handling production. Are you doing mostly hand tools? Are you more mechanized? What equipment and implements are you using?
Yeah, it's a really good subject. Yeah, we mechanize as much as possible. Cut flowers, defy mechanization in the harvesting part of things. Pretty much everything has to be hand harvested, unlike a lot of other farming sectors. And that's tricky. That's definitely a disadvantage in terms of profitability because, as you know, labor is really expensive for an industry where margins are pretty thin. And so in all the other sectors, we try to mechanize as much as possible. So we have a cultivating tractor. We use tractors for tillage and for managing weeds. So, at this stage, we have 2 tractors. We probably at our scale should have a second cultivating tractor or even a third. So we try to avoid hand tools for managing weeds as much as possible. That being said, of course, sometimes weather conditions or other, equipment issues, there are reasons why we have to. So yeah, we do plenty of hoeing, we do plenty of hand weeding, but we do try to minimize that as much as possible. Like we planted, I think, like 27,000 dahlia tubers this year, and nobody hoed them at all this season. So we did we did have to do some hand weeding, actually more than I was expecting this year on certain parts of our dahlia blocks, but overall we try to minimize hand scale labor when it comes to those things because there's plenty of it in harvesting.
I'd love to shift gears a bit and talk about organic certification for cut flowers. When did your farm decide to become certified, and what made you decide to go down that path?
Yeah, so we certified several years ago now, and we decided to certify just as another way to set ourselves apart. I mean, all of our growing practices were organic anyways, and I think that's probably the case for a lot of small scale flower growers. I know a lot of people are committed to, responsible growing practices. And so we thought, well, we're doing all this extra work to grow things responsibly. Why not let our customers know in a way that they can trust that we're doing that? And so we decided to certify. And yeah, we thought, having when we were working, by that point we were working with wholesalers, and so we were sending kind of shop ready buckets, like floor, ready for the shop floor buckets that are, everything's individually sleeved and looking nice for designer customers to come and do their shopping. And we thought something that could set us apart, in addition to our high quality and having unique product, we thought something that could set us apart for things that are common in the cut flower trade would be to have a USDA organic sticker visible for everyone so that they know that our flowers are responsibly grown and processed. And yeah, I mean, a lot of this, I think, too, a lot of this came out of just hearing all of the kind of anecdotal stories about people working in the cut flower industry and getting sick after many years of working in the cut flower industry because there are a lot of pretty nasty chemicals used in ornamental plant production. And so, yeah, we would hear this from wholesalers, from designers who had been in the business a long time. Anyone who's been in the business for a long time, kind of, if they haven't had an experience themselves, they probably know somebody or know somebody who had some bad experiences. Yeah, so we thought that having the ability to put a verifiable sticker on our product would let shoppers know that, these things are totally safe to handle and we're grown responsibly. We, over the years started to learn about, we came at this from organic vegetable farming. So our practices were always organic. That's all we really knew how to do. We don't have pesticide applicator credentials. We don't know even what most of the common chemicals are. Like, we have no baseline familiarity ourselves with them. So it was never really a choice. It was just sort of what we knew to do. But over time, we started to, hear these stories about people getting sick from handling cut flowers for a long time. And we also started to learn that actually in ornamental plant production, there's a lot more chemical usage than with, conventional food crops, for example. Simply because these things are not intended for human consumption, there's no sort of gut check by the grower. There's no sort of best practices recommended by regulators about the usage of these chemicals on plants that aren't intended for human consumption. So actually, pound for pound, or square foot per square foot, there's a lot more herbicide and pesticide applied to ornamental plants than there are to food crops. And so ornamental plants produced conventionally and globally tend to have way more herbicide and pesticide residue on them than conventional vegetables. So yeah, we care about how ornamental plants are produced. We want to see a world where things are shifting more towards responsible production methods so that the production of ornamental plants everywhere has less deleterious impact on the environment and on wildlife and on people handling these plants. And so, yeah, another motivation that entered into it was, well, wouldn't it be great if there were organic ornamental plants out there the way there are organic vegetables? And, we talked about the idea with our customers a bit before starting, and they all loved the idea in theory. They didn't really give us a strong sense that like it would boost our sales or that we would be able to charge a higher price for anything. So I'll say flat out that has not been the case for us. Our prices are still pretty competitive with non-certified growers. We don't add a premium for our organic sticker. And has it boosted our sales? Well, we were already selling as much as we could harvest. So I can't really say that it's boosted our sales. I think it's started to become associated with us a little bit. So I think it's helps sort of maintain our reputation, I guess. But yeah, it's strange. In the ornamental plant world, nobody knows to look for certified organic products yet. And so nobody's asking for them. But my understanding of organic food markets is that there were a lot of producers first, and then the demand started to grow because people started seeing organic stickers on their food. And once people started seeing it at farmers markets or at grocery stores, then they started wanting it. So we're very much in the stage of like, well, maybe if we build it, they will come. And so we're hoping that by being a successful certified organic ornamental plant business, that maybe other growers will make the leap and certify themselves. And maybe over time, customers will start to see that, oh, there is another option and start asking for organic ornamental plants. And this goes for not only the cut flowers that we sell, but we also sell plants for planting. We are a registered nursery. So for kind of both parts, both the horticulture and the floriculture, we're hoping that by being in a certified organic business that maybe other people will take notice and want to either get into start doing the same thing, producing certified organic plants and flowers, and or, customers will start asking for it.
Yeah, and you're in such a great position to kind of be trend setting, right? You're selling into some of the biggest floral designers in the world who are sharing your flowers and the fact that they're organic certified. So it seems possible. Maybe there will be this big shift. It's exciting. I know and I have talked about it before, but in case the listeners don't know, it's actually illegal for growers to describe their flowers as organic without being USDA certified. For folks that don't know, can you talk a bit about the difference between sustainably grown or pesticide-free flowers versus certified organic flowers? Maybe if a person's sustainably growing or naturally growing now and they're curious about what it would look like to certify organic, what additional steps would they need to take in terms of inputs and seeds to post-harvest and also record keeping?
Yeah. Well, maybe I'll just try to tackle the first part of that question, and you can help me remember to circle back to the second part, kind of the more detailed mechanics of it. But yeah, just in terms of organic certification versus the other certifications that are out there, There are a lot of certifications out there. And yes, it is illegal for anyone to use the word organic, even other permutations like organically grown, in their marketing materials if they are not a certified organic business selling certified organic products. So yeah, just a warning to everyone out there. I've heard that there's more funding for enforcement of those rules available these days. So yeah, I'm hopeful that actually enforcement will pick up, because it's been a pretty lax part of the organic system in the United States so far, for at least for certain markets and certain products. But the main reason why we choose organic certification over all the other ones is that, to me, organic certification is the only guarantee out there that has teeth, that has accountability and verifiability really built into it. If you get in trouble for organic fraud, there are some serious legal and financial consequences. And I don't believe that exists for the other certifications that are out there. And so anybody can say that you are pesticide free or that you are certified naturally grown, but there aren't really consequences for anybody who's not telling the truth. Whereas with organic certification, if you're not telling the truth, you have regular inspections that try to verify that. And if you're not telling the truth, you can get in some serious trouble. So to me, the organic system it's highly imperfect. It has a lot of flaws. We could do a whole separate podcast on just the flaws and frustrations for producers working in the organic system. However, that being said, I think it's the only system that, like I mentioned, has verifiability, accountability, and real teeth. So that's why I believe in and stand by organic certification as the best way forward for anybody who wants to demonstrate to their customers and for consumers to be able to believe in the product that they're buying.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you for that explanation. And yeah, I'm curious about what does it really mean? Listeners might be familiar with organic certification for vegetables, but I do think it's a little different for flowers, especially post-harvest. Can you talk a little bit about what are the actual sort of steps? What do you have to do?
Yeah, so simply put, organic certification means that no synthetic, or synthetic meaning, man-made, things that are not found in nature, that no synthetic products are applied to your growing medium as fertilizer, as herbicide, as pesticide, to your plants at any point in the production process. And that would include the packaging of it. So, in cut flowers, the packaging is a bucket of water, and you're not supposed to add any synthetic material to that water. No preservative, holding solutions. There is one product out there that we did try many years ago that is sold as a OMRI approved, OMRI being the Organic Materials Research Institute, I believe is the acronym. But that's what certifies products as organic. So yeah, as far as I know, there was only ever one OMRI approved like holding solution or preservative for cut flowers. We simply didn't find it to be necessary. So as long as we grow hundreds of species of plant every year, and we don't grow a single thing that we've found preservative to be a requirement for, because everything that we harvest goes just straight into plain water. And so I think as long as you're practicing sort of basic hygiene with your buckets, making sure to use clean buckets and clean water, ideally filtered water, then we've just had no need for any holding solution. But no, organic requirements come into play at all steps throughout the process, from seed to sale, as they like to say. So yes, we have to purchase organic seed whenever organic seed is available, which for ornamental plants is, unsurprisingly, is almost never. There are very few things that are available commercially as organic seed. You don't need to use organic seed for organic production if there's no organic seed available. You can use conventionally produced seed. However, that seed has to be untreated. It can't be treated with any prohibited substances. And there are laws in the United States about selling treated seed. It has to be indicated as such. So conventional untreated seed is usable for organic production as long as no organic seed was available. And then, of course, with your potting medium, if you're growing things from seed, has to be OMRI approved. And any fertilizers that you apply or any pest controls that you apply have to be OMRI approved. And then one of the biggest aspects, I would say, most of those things, a lot of growers who aren't certified are already doing. So I think the transition for a lot of smaller growers who are growing responsibly would actually be fairly easy. The hardest part would be the record keeping. Record keeping is a big part of organic certification, and that's part of what gives it its credibility. Is you need to be able to document with receipts everything from the purchase of the seed to your final sale of the product. So anything that was applied throughout that whole time, you need to be able to show receipts for. And yeah, so it turns you into being a very thorough record keeper, maybe more thorough than is strictly necessary for good production, but it really forced us to become much better record keepers. And that's, I think a benefit. I think it's just made us better growers. But that is definitely the biggest hurdle, I think, for somebody who's not already certified but is already doing all the organic practices. The one thing they're probably not doing is keeping all of those records in the way you need to for your organic inspections.
And I know a lot of cut flower growers, myself included, rely on buying in plugs from conventional greenhouses, but that would not be allowed, correct?
That would not be allowed. You're not allowed to buy in annual plugs, conventional annual plugs for organic production. That's true. So, yes, one thing, I think for a lot of people, the stumbling block is probably Lysianthus, because that is the hardest thing for people to grow themselves from seed. Many annuals you really don't need, and biennials, you really don't need very advanced greenhouse infrastructure to grow. A lot of them you could probably just do outdoors in a protected space, and you'll get a lot of usable transplants from that. But I think where a lot of people get hung up is some of the trickier germinators, and principal among them being Lysianthus. So anybody who's not willing to either give up Lysianthus or grow it from seed is gonna have a hard time making the transition to organic certification. For a number of years, we just did not grow Lysianthus, and we grew our business to the scale that it's at now without Lysianthus. So, is it strictly necessary? I think that's a good question people could ask themselves. And then we have circled back to growing Lysianthus because finally I found some companies that were willing to sell us seed that we could use in organic production. That's another part of the problem, is even if you don't buy in the transplants, you need to buy seed that is allowable by the organic program. And most of the Lysianthus seed available in this country is not allowed because of, and we can dive more into this. I think by and large, Lysianthus is probably where a lot of people get stopped up.
I will do a little plug that we did publish in Growing for Market, I think earlier this year or late last year, an article all about how to grow Lysianthus from seed. I wrote that article. I'm not here today to tell you to do it, but if you're curious a little bit more about that process, then go check that out.
That's great. Yeah, there's some very good resources out there about it. It is not for the faint of heart. Lysianthus from seed is very tricky, but will make you a very good propagator if you get good at I can't think of anything harder than Lysianthus from seed. So if you figure out how to do it from seed, then you can grow pretty much anything from seed.
So I think that's a good segue because you're mentioning, propagation and starting things from seed. You alluded to it a little while earlier, but your farm has also, I don't know how recently, but you've become a nursery now in New York State. And it seems like you're taking in particular an interest in native plants or cut flowers. Why do you think, why natives? Why is that important for growers right now? What benefits do they offer?
Yeah, so we started growing native plants because, again, we wanted to set ourselves apart from everybody else. And because we were near the New York metropolitan area, we thought that would be a good way to do it is grow strange things that people haven't seen before. And so the first place we looked to was our wild spaces around us. There's plenty of beautiful things there that, you don't see in the cut flower trade and that are unique to this place. It tells a story about where these things grew. So first we just started incorporating native plants into the products that we sold as cut flowers. Over time, as we became more knowledgeable plants people, we started to learn about the important role of native plants in supporting healthy ecosystems. And so over the last decades, there has been a burgeoning and now very vibrant native plant marketplace. And gardeners the world over now are seeking out native plants to put into their gardens, wherever they are, whatever plants are native to where they are. And so we kept getting requests. From the first days we started selling flowers at farmers markets, people started asking us for plants. Probably anybody selling flowers at a farmers market has heard that request. Like, oh, is there any way we can buy plants from you so we can have this in our garden? And so it sort of clicked for me that, oh, what flowers are being sold and are popular for floral arrangements that really has an influence on what people want to plant in the landscape. And so I realized, like, oh, well, I don't really want to encourage people to go and plant a lot of exotic plants in their gardens necessarily, because what this moment of climate change, of ecological collapse that everyone's witnessing the world over calls for is being a little more responsible about our decisions in terms of what plants we're putting out into the landscape. Not just for like restoring habitat, but also the human environment. Human-centric landscapes are occupying an ever larger percentage of the total land. And so it's incumbent upon people to think about what plants we're filling human spaces with. And what are those plants doing? Are they beneficial to other wildlife? Are they having a negative effect on other wildlife? Because every plant is potentially, a home or food for insects and mammals and birds and all the creatures that are really important to our ecosystem. So I decided before we ever sold any plants that if we were going to become a nursery, we would only sell plants that are ecologically appropriate for our region. And so we started growing more and more native plants for our cut flower business. And simultaneously, we started growing, extra plants that we could sell to gardeners, to other growers, with the hope that, we'll help we'll add our little stone to the wall of this native plant movement. So that's sort of how it all began.
That's really cool. I confess that I know we grow some native plants, but mostly stuff that's advertised and created specifically for cut flowers rather than the other way around. So I'm curious if you could recommend a few varieties for growers looking to get started, maybe some easy-ish native plants to grow as cuts.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Why don't I did in preparation of this make a little list, or actually just took it from a presentation that I did about growing native plants for cut flowers. Well, it's funny. There are a number of plants that are common in the cut flower trade that are technically derived from plants native to North America. And I will say that like native plants change, of course, wherever you are. The plants that are appropriate to your ecosystems in New York will not be the same as the plants that are appropriate in Oregon or in Texas. But Lysianthus, which we've been talking about a lot, actually descends from Eustoma grandiflora, which is the Texas bluebell, a native to the southern and southwestern United States. So Lysianthus, I don't actually know what all goes into the breeding, the surely complicated breeding of Lysianthus, if there are other Eustoma species involved in that hybridization. But you could grow native Texas bluebells that would, be a wild version of Lysianthus. And I've actually looked into getting seed for that. So yeah, things that we love that are native to us. Some of these again are common already in the cut flower trade, so easy, low hanging fruit. Amsonia is one that I really like a lot. We grow for foliage. We grow Viburnum trilobum, American cranberry. We also cut it for its flowers in the spring. All the mountain mints, pygnanthemums, those are all native plants that we grow a lot of. There are several penstemons that are native here. Anemone virginiana, Eutrochium maculatum, or Joe Pye weed, Cephalanthus occidentalis, that's buttonbush, Corydalis sempervirens, that's been probably my favorite new addition this year. It's called Pale Corydalis. Really beautiful, very productive plant, and our customers went gaga over it this year. And it was very easy to grow, easy to germinate. That sometimes you grow these things and it's a real head scratcher. Like, why aren't tons of people growing this? Because it is an amazing producer. Let's see, Leucothui we grow for foliage. Thalictrums we grow for their flowers or seed heads. Right now we're harvesting a lot of fall asters that are incredibly beautiful. Really, we can't cut enough of them for our customers. A lot of goldenrods are native to North America. Centaria americana is native to North America. Not to where I live, but to North America. A lot of native cherry trees make great cuts in the spring. And then there's loads of grasses. There's so many grasses that can be used for cut flowers, and people love, like, designers and wholesalers love foliage and grasses. They never have enough of those things. And so, yeah, there's a very long list of grasses that people could be using in our region that grow really easily and are very productive. Their main downside is a lot of grasses are slow to harvest. So that is the main shortcoming of some of these things. To get a lot of stems takes a lot of labor hours. But some of the grasses that we really like to grow for cuts, Glyceria canadensis, that's a rattlesnake grass. Hystrix patula, that's bottlebrush grass. There's a couple different panicum and Eragrostis species that are really great. They look just like, frosted explosion, but bigger, better. Andropogon, which is a big blue stem. Chasmanthium latifolium, which is one a lot of people already grow. That's sea oats. And you'll also notice that I'm using a lot of botanical names because when you're growing native plants, that's sort of what you have to do. Too many things can be under the umbrella of a common name, and you're not really talking about the same thing. And so if you get really into growing native plants, you start learning a lot of Latin.
Yeah, cool. That's a great list. So I'm sure listeners are scribbling it down and re-listening to catch them all. Thank you for that. You also did give a great presentation with the ASCFG last year with some of those pictures and stuff as well. And can we buy all of these from Plugs for You, or many of them?
Yeah, we grow many of these as plugs. Right now, we don't sell any woody species as plugs, just herbaceous perennials and some annuals. But yeah, a lot of these are available from us from March until November. That's when we try to have plug trays available for namely wholesale clients. We have mostly just been selling these as wholesale products, so full trays of plugs. Yeah.
Cool. And I think that you also sell certified organic dahlia tubers, right?
Yes, yes. And technically, dahlias are also a North American native plant. They're not native to anywhere near where we live and work. They are from the highlands of Mexico, as far as I understand. But yes, we do sell organic dahlia tubers. That's sort of the one main exception to, strictly native plants that are native where we are. Yeah, we sell dahlia tubers every winter. They usually become available around the holidays and then are available through the early spring. Yeah, we have a lot of varieties, and our list of varieties is growing every year, and these are certified organic tubers. We also, I guess while I'm here, I'll plug the Hudson Valley Seed Company. We also work with them and grow a lot of tubers for them. And they're a great seed company. They sell a lot of certified organic products, and they've been a pleasure to work with. And yeah, they're just a really great company that everybody should buy from.
That's great. Yeah, that's a really great resource. I think there's very few certified organic dahlia tubers out there. I'm curious, you said you have close to 30,000 dahlias. Are you using a potato digger for those, an undercutter? How are you digging them up?
Last year was actually the first year we used a potato digger, and it's a game changer. Before that, I mean, at the very beginning, we used digging forks, and we did that for a number of years. And then when we bought a tractor, a fairly cheap implement when you get a tractor is what's called a bed lifter, or some people call it an undercutter. And that's an implement that it's just a blade, an angled blade that goes, can dig down. They can dig down pretty deep depending on your soil and your rocks. But yeah, when it goes through a bed, you see the whole bed sort of undulate over it, and it loosens everything up. And I mean, you still have to pull a heavy clump of tubers out of the ground, so it's helpful. Like, you don't have to do as much forking action, but it overall, if you're growing over a couple thousand tubers, then it's not saving you a lot of time. And then yeah, we struggled with that for more years than I'd care to admit. And then last year we bit the bullet and bought a potato digger. And actually, the real impetus for that one was that one year recently, this was maybe like 4 or 5 years ago, it took forever for frost to come and kill back the dahlia plants, which is an important part of dahlia digging. You want that period between either mowing or frost killing the top part of the plant. And I guess there are chemical changes in the tubers that start happening at that point, and then so you want to wait for those to happen before you actually remove them from the ground. But we had a year where frost came really late, and then we got a lot of really cold, really wet weather, and so we didn't have enough time to finish digging the dahlias before some of them started suffering frost damage. So we had a really narrow window, is what I'm getting at, to harvest these tubers out of the ground. And so we just needed a faster way to do it. And of course, there are other benefits, loads of hours of labor saved. I'm sure this machine paid for itself in its first year. It felt really expensive at the time because we got a big 2-row potato digger. So yeah, I'm thrilled that we have it again this year. I'm thinking that it will probably take us all of, a crew, I think, of 3 or 4 people. I think we'll be able to get all of the tubers we're going to dig out of the ground in maybe 3 or 4 days. So
We have just about half of what you have, around 15,000 in the ground. And I'm going to take this as my permission to try and get my hands on a potato digger this fall because, yeah, that sounds a lot better than what we currently do. So thank you for
yeah,
that.
Yep. Yeah, there's a huge savings in labor. Our staff loves it too. They're like, "Oh my gosh, thank goodness."
Yeah.
Now we're picking clumps up off the top of the ground and putting them in a basket rather than struggling with a fork or lifting these heavy clumps that are still in the ground. And it does remove a good amount of soil, not as much as I would like, but that's mainly because, well, it depends a lot on soil conditions. If it's really wet or what your soil types are, that'll affect moisture conditions and your soil type will affect how much soil remains on the clump of tubers. But yeah, one thing I would recommend to anybody thinking of going that route is that having a tractor that can move very slowly is really helpful. So that means either having kind of an older conventional tractor that has something called a creeper gear that just allows you to like crawl at a snail's pace. Or on smaller tractors, a lot of them are hydrostatic tractors, and this might not make sense for everybody, I guess, who doesn't have tractors already in their production systems. But basically, the point I'm trying to make is that if you're going to use any digging machine like a potato digger, or there's also other machines that could work. There's something called a root shaker that is used by big growers of bare root plants. In fact, I was looking at a machine recently. The only one currently being produced that I could find is in Canada, but they do sell to the United States. And it looks like it costs about the same as our potato digger. I think it would do maybe a better job. I haven't tried it myself. I think it would maybe do a better job removing soil from the clumps because it has this kind of up and down shaking action rather than just bouncing along a chain. So that I think would be a really great machine. But also with that, I think the key is having a tractor that can move slowly down the bed. Our tractor does not have a creeper gear and it's not a hydrostatic, so we can't just drive slowly. So we kind of have to, we keep it in the lowest gear possible and use the lowest throttle possible for using a PTO driven implement. But it just kind of coasts through that bed at the speed that it goes at. And so not as much soil is being removed from the clumps as I would like. But that's, yeah, maybe too much detail.
No, that's great. So thank you for all that. I think just finally, and maybe the answer is the potato digger, but our audience is mostly, small, mid-sized farmers like you and me. So do you have any fun trick or tool or hack or piece of advice that you'd like to kind of end with to share with folks and hopefully make their lives a little easier?
Tools and tips and tricks, and one that I've been thinking about recently is netting on crops that need support netting, applying it early and applying multiple layers is, I think, a way to save yourself a lot of headache with things that need support netting, like Lysianthus or heirloom chrysanthemums. You never want to be behind the ball on that one. Another one I think is beneficial insects for aphid control. If you're growing ranunculus and heirloom chrysanthemums in greenhouses and using the same greenhouses for that over time, aphids will very likely become a problem. So early application, like as soon as you notice anything of beneficial insects, and sticking to flying insects, they are much more effective, I find, than insects that have to walk from plant to plant. So that mainly means lacewings or parasitic wasps. I really throw spaghetti at the wall with that. So I buy several species of wasp and do it multiple times. And what else? Oh, one thing I would recommend to growers who are thinking about, maybe have a few years of experience and are thinking about how to become more profitable or more, and therefore more sustainable, would be to not get attached to certain crops or production methods and be willing to ruthlessly cut things out of your crop plan if they are not profitable for you. I know not everyone can do this depending on your market. You may have to, or you may think you have to grow a little bit of everything, but being near a large city, I think there's room for growers who just want to focus in on like foliage or just want to focus in on woody plants or just want to focus in on, summer annuals. I think I think a lot of people want to do everything, and I think that can sometimes be a stumbling block for folks. So I've definitely found, over the years that when we cut the things out that aren't working for us, we have a better season the next year.
That's great advice. That's really helpful. Thank you.
Yeah.
Awesome. This has been such a great conversation. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I know listeners are going to learn a lot from you. Where can folks best reach you? Maybe a website or a social media account, especially where they can check out your nursery offerings?
Yeah, we're on Instagram at Treadlight Farm. It's tread like the tread on your shoe and light like a light bulb, all one word. And then our website is treadlight-farm.com. And there, people can find information about us and our growing practices and how to shop for plants if that's what you're interested in. Yeah, I'm not the most active social media person, but I try to respond to messages when I get them and post things when I think they might be helpful or interesting. So yeah, that's where folks can find us.
Awesome. Great. Well, thank you again for taking the time, Matt, and talk to you soon.
Great. Thank you, Rebecca. It's been lovely chatting.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Growing for Market podcast. If you've been enjoying the show, please consider giving us a follow and a rating or a review. It really helps others find the podcast. For more tips and information from farmer to farmer, check out our magazine at growingformarket.com. Whether you're a commercial grower or just want to grow like one, subscribe to Growing for Market magazine for the nitty-gritty of growing, marketing, and the business of market farming. We publish 10 issues per year with articles written by experienced farmers on topics ranging from tools and techniques to farm business operations and marketing. If you've been listening to the Growing for Market podcast and haven't yet checked out the Growing for Market magazine, we've made a change so that you can try the magazine for free. We've added a free month to the beginning of all first-time subscriptions. Try out the digital or paper magazine, and if it's not for you, cancel within 28 days and you'll never get billed. With digital subscriptions starting at just $39 per year, you get a year of the magazine plus over 150 back issues from the last 15 years. Head on over to growingformarket.com and subscribe today to benefit from over 3 decades of writing by farmers for farmers in Growing for Market magazine.